A warm welcome to you out there in the darkness as these blinding lights are on me. My name's Tom, I'm another elder here, and welcome to the City Church Carol service. Now, in about 3 hours' time or thereabouts, this nation will have a new X Factor winner. That's the correct response. Thank you for that, and it's an exciting evening. I don't know who you're favouring. I think at the moment there's only two guys now, is that right? Two people in the final. I think, is that Joe McElderry? And I think there's a man called Ollie Murr. And I think I'm told by my wife and others that Ollie Murr is in fact the bookie's favourite to be the new X Factor finalist winner, man. And will be crowned the new pop idol, the pop star of this country, and will almost, for definite, have a number one at Christmas and all the other jazz. And who here has been following the X Factor? Anyone here at all? I must admit, I've got sucked in. I have got sucked in. I started watching it just because, of course, my wife likes it and our daughters like it, but I have been sucked in. And Lucy Jones, how come she went out? Do you remember the Lucy Jones week a few weeks ago? Scandal. She was amazing. She got voted out. Anyway, it's been an up and down kind of journey the last few months in the X Factor. But the interesting thing is this, is that if, for example, you knew the great Ollie Murr. Now, I'm told that Ollie Murr apparently has been, for many years now, been working in a call centre somewhere in the country. Now, if you'd known Ollie Murr for the last few years, you would know that he can sing. You would know that he's dashingly good looking. You would know that he wears very tight jeans. You would know that he's a great dancer. But he would still be Ollie Murr, would he not? He'd be the guy in the office that, you catch singing the loos, the guy that every so often you just find, doing a little groovy dance. Thanks. It would be Ollie Murr, that guy in the call centre that we work with. But in a few hours, if Ollie, as the bookies are predicting, becomes the new king of pop, Ollie Murr's talents will be exactly the same. Those guys who were familiar with him will still know him, but now, no longer will he just be Ollie Murr, someone that those who knew him were familiar with and sort of just knew in one level. He will now be the new king of pop in this country. Now, why on earth am I talking about this? I'll tell you why, because familiarity, they say, breeds... It does. Now, I don't know if I completely agree. I think certainly familiarity can breed indifference. It can breed apathy, at least. And so if you knew Ollie Murr and you knew his talents, you just know him, you're familiar with him. Familiarity would breed at least indifference to him. Now, the reason I'm mentioning this is because I think that what you might see in that story there regarding Ollie Murr is actually true with all of us in just about every arena in life. And I would humbly suggest that this time of year, Christmas, where in every primary school up and down the land, on the radio and in the car, all we hear in one shape or form are the stories that we've just heard. The stories about Mary, about Joseph, and a little fella called Jesus, who was born in her tummy miraculously, known as Emmanuel, which means God with us. Well done. So you know it. We all know it. The whole nation knows the story. But I think it's just possible, a bit like those people who know Ollie Murr, that we could be familiar with something, have it right under our nose, at one level know it inside out, and yet, do you know what? Not really see the amazingness of it right there underneath our noses. Just as those who know Ollie would be thinking, wow, it took, as it were, Simon Cowell and the whole British public to go, wow, do you realise this guy that you've been working with, he's actually amazing. I want to humbly suggest tonight, when we look at the Bible, when we hear those verses that we've been hearing 1,000 times throughout our life about Mary and Joseph and little Jesus born in a manger, and he was God, and he was born in a manger, in a virgin's womb, we can get familiar with these verses, and yet actually, surely, what we've just heard, if it's true, even if we're familiar with it, surely this is kind of important. Surely if a baby really was born in Mary's womb miraculously, and he really was God, Emmanuel, God with us, then surely, even if we're familiar with it, surely what we need to do is somehow wake up this Christmas to the power of these verses. Somehow, whether you're a Christian or whether you're not a Christian, maybe this is the first time you've even thought about Jesus and God or whatever, surely when we read those verses, they should actually be something not familiar and contemptuous, but actually something shocking and amazing. Because I would want to humbly suggest that actually if these verses are true, they are anything but things that should send us off to sleep in the school nativity play, but actually they should be things that we go, what? This is mad. This is amazing. So, for example, let me remind you of some of the verses that we've already heard. For example, these verses were heard earlier, and I didn't hear anyone going, when they were read. I just heard us sit there, as we do every year, and go, yes, of course. So, for example, Luke chapter 2, verse 26, verse 1. Chapter 1, verse 26. In the 6th month, the angel Gabriel was sent from God to a city of Galilee named Nazareth. Right. To a virgin betrothed to a man whose name was Joseph, of the house of David, and the virgin's name was Mary. And he came to her and said, "Greetings, O favoured one, the Lord is with you." So let's just pause there for a moment. Let's try and take that in, what we've just read. An angel from heaven came to a place called Nazareth, which was kind of, if you don't know much about the Middle East, Nazareth was like Nowheresville, okay? It was nothing ever good, like Chartham, you know, that kind of thing. It was just a joke. Just a joke, all you Charthamites. But think of somewhere, I don't know, just really unimportant. Nazareth comes to a virgin, a young teenage girl, and he says these words to her. Now, I don't know about what you're like when someone sneaks up on you, okay? When I get sneaked up on, my instinctive reaction is not good, okay? When I try and sneak up romantically to my lovely wife Josie when she's washing up and I just see her there and I think, I know, I'll be romantic. I'll sneak over to her, grab her on the hips and go, I love you. As I do that, her instinctive reaction is actually, karate chop to the nose. When I sneak up on her, her reaction isn't very good. And I think probably most of us would be like that. So picture the scene now. If that happens in the human level, just imagine an angel sneaking up on you and saying, "Greetings, O favoured one." And notice, this isn't just an angel, this is the angel Gabriel. Now, when you look at what the Bible tells us about when angels appear to fully grown men, there's kind of one sort of major reaction. It's kind of like this. Ah! Whenever you look at angels coming to earth and talking to humans, generally, in the Bible, big grown scary men see angels and go, ah, scary. However, this isn't just an angel, this is the angel Gabriel. He's got a name. He's like super special. So he's like, for example, anyone here watch The Apprentice? Yeah, many of us, if we admit to it. So it's kind of like you're doing your task. It would be scary enough if Nick or Margaret came along and inspected. This is like Alan Sugar coming, the head honcho, the chief angel coming and greeting you. But how do we see Mary react? Bearing in mind, Mary, we often think, when we look in pictures, you know, in religious things, we see a picture of Mary and she's got like a halo and like a gold sash on and she looks about 35. Scrub that picture from your mind. Mary was probably between the age of 12 and 16. Yeah, exactly. It is. Any 12-year-olds here? 12-year-olds? That's fairly young, should we say. Yeah, just out of primary school, just started at Canterbury High. There you are, living in Chartham, or wherever. And the chief angel of heaven comes knocking on your door, sneaking up on you. That's the scene. So it's fairly mind-blowing so far. Familiarity can breed contempt. I want us tonight to be not familiar with this. I want us to be thinking, whoa, if this is true, this is kind of important. Let's read on. But she was, I love this, she was greatly troubled at the saying and tried to, I love it, discern what sort of greeting this might be. I bet. And the angel said to her, "Do not be afraid, Mary, for you have found favour with God." So he tries to kind of, you know, he tries to calm her. It's almost like the image of, I don't know, like a huge, great grizzly bear kind of pacify a toddler, you know? It's not going to work. But amazingly, Mary Mary is just a cool cucumber. Despite being a young teenage girl and having the head angel of heaven talking to you about having favour, she seems in a place of a remarkable calmness. And the angel says this. He says, and behold, you will conceive in your womb, she's a virgin, and bear a son, and you shall call his name Jesus. Now, you know what it's like when you've got some somewhat big news to break to someone? Some news that might freak them out a little bit, that might be a little bit shocking. What do? You kind of soften the blow, don't you? You work your way into it. I remember 3 years ago, I'd been off work, I was ill, been married 1 year, and Josie came home and was like, hi, honey, a cup of tea? Well, a cup of tea? I was like, yeah, sure, great. It's like, you know how you like kids? I was like, yeah, I like kids, yeah. You know how there's not been much on telly recently, so, we've kind of, yeah. Well, the thing is, and by this point, of course, I've clocked it. She's pregnant! But she eases her way in. It's what we do, isn't it? That's what Gabe does. He eases his way in. Little hint here, little hint there, trying to not freak out the little 12-year-old. He says, yeah, his name will be Jesus. Now, we might think, oh, yeah, okay, it's just a choice of name. Jesus, what does it mean? It means God saves. Little hint there. This baby's going to be fairly important. Then he goes on. He will be called Great, bearing in mind the nickname for one of the rulers at that time was called Herod, and he was called Herod the Great. He was a king. So again, another little hint here that probably this baby's going to be fairly important. He will be called the Son of the Most High. It's getting less and less subtle now. And the Lord will give to him the throne of his father David, and he will reign over the house of Jacob forever, ever, and his kingdom will have no end. And he runs out. No, he doesn't. He stands there. He's broken the big bombshell news to the 12-year-old girl from Chartham. You're going to give birth to God. Let that sink in for a moment. That is what happened. The chief angel of heaven came to planet Earth. And if we read on, my goodness, I tell you, mighty Mary, she is an amazing role model for us, male or female. She in effect says, listen, although this could mean huge scandal for me, although this could mean scandal for my betrothed one, Joseph, Lord, this is clearly from you, let it be so. But the point is this, the point I'm trying to get us to feel afresh today is just the entrance, just the beginning few verses of what we get so familiar with every single year, I think you'll agree, should be anything but familiar. We should treat it with anything but contempt or indifference or apathy. These are staggering verses. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. Because perhaps you're someone just looking into the Christian faith, you're just starting to think about this thing. We haven't got time to go into great detail tonight, but what I want to say is the amazing kind of staggering flavor of this thing just gets more and more and more amazing. And if you want to summarize it up, what's Jesus all about? He's about this. He's both fully man and yet fully God. Go figure. He again and again claims he was fully man, born of a real woman, a real girl, really. And yet, mind-bendingly so, he claimed in so many different ways, actually, I, though, am God. Now you might think, how does he claim that, Tom? How does he claim he's God? Well, let me give you a few examples. First of all, Jesus, in John chapter 6, says this, I have come down from heaven. Big deal, you might say. Surely that's not that big a deal in terms of a sentence. Well, actually it is. Because if you look at around all the other leaders of the world religions, none of them have ever claimed to come down from heaven to earth. In fact, this world is littered with people of one shape, form or another who have kind of claimed to go from earth to heaven in one sense of the word. For example, there are many celebrities who have had near-death experiences who have claimed to go kind of from earth to some sort of heavenly realm. For example, Sharon Stone. For example, Jane Seymour. Elizabeth Taylor, Peter Sellers. They've all claimed in some way to have near-death experiences where they've gone from earth to some heavenly realm. You know, even Ozzy Osbourne. Ozzy Osbourne famously said, when he had his near-death experience, he said, I saw a light shining through the darkness. But there was no bleep angels, and there were no trumpets, and there was no man with a big bushy beard. Even Ozzy Osbourne has claimed to, in some sense, gone from earth to heaven. In fact, Muhammad, who obviously was the leader of the Islamic faith, he claimed on one occasion to have a earth to heaven experience of some kind. But listen, Jesus was the only man of significance that's ever lived who audaciously claimed, I have come down from heaven to earth. That's a big deal. Do you see the difference there? He claimed it. He claimed, I'm God. I'm from heaven. That's where I live. But I'm coming down to earth to show you who God is. Even Jesus' enemies knew that he was claiming to be God. In John chapter 5, it says that they wanted to kill him. Why? And the words are, because he was making himself equal with God. We see that Jesus, he claimed never to sin. Now again, if you compare Jesus with the other religious leaders of this world, Krishna, Buddha, Muhammad, they would all never claim to be sinless. They would freely admit that they have sinned. But Jesus claimed that he had never sinned. Jesus said these words in John. He says, I and the Father are one. You see, the great prophets of other religions would claim that they have spoken on behalf of God, but they would always say, but we are not God. In fact, explicitly, those other world religious leaders, such as Buddha and Muhammad and Krishna, they explicitly say, we are not God to their followers. Jesus said, no, I'm God. Me and the Father are one. I'm not just speaking, as it were, as a prophet on his behalf. If you've seen me, you've seen God. And Jesus, get a hold of this, he even said that he forgave people's sins. In Luke chapter 7, talking to a woman, Jesus says, I forgive you your sins. And the people looking on say, who on earth can forgive someone's sins apart from God? So Jesus, in so many different ways, claimed to be God. Claimed to be God. The entrance point of Jesus coming to earth, as we've just read, was utterly staggering, and his entire life was jam-packed full of staggering claims. So why am I saying this? I'm saying this because at this time of year, something that we get oh so familiar with, we can become apathetic to and indifferent to. And I guess that's the one thing that we can't become. Because Jesus doesn't really leave us with that as an option. You either love him or you hate him, I guess. And what we see here is at least three things with which I'll finish. Is that Jesus, if just say he really was both God and man, then there's three at least things that we can conclude about him, simply from his birth, even without looking at the rest of his life. First of all, the humility of God. The humility of God. Just think about the humility of God that it would take. Him who made Jupiter and Saturn and Uranus and all the planets in this world actually came as a baby in a 12, 13-year-old's womb. Such was his humility and passion to have relationship with this world. I mean, I, on Saturday mornings, like to take Daisy, my 3-year-old, to ballet classes. And inevitably what happens is they're doing their little do-do-do-do-do, singing away, dancing around, and then suddenly it goes into Daisy's little brain. I know, it would be great if my dad joined us in this circle as we did Swan Lake or whatever and danced around with us. Every week I get singled out. All the other men are standing there. All the other dads like, sucker. And over I go. Why? Because I love her. And for me, the humility required to do that feels huge. But I tell you what, that's nothing compared to the humility of Jesus Christ. If his claims to be God were really true, for him to humble himself and become a baby, well, it's something that we should all think about. Secondly, if it were true that Jesus really became a baby, and he was God as well as man. Not just his humility, but also his commitment. Now, why do I say that? I think a lot of people, when they think about if there's God or not, they think, well, if there is a God, well, to be honest with you, would he have any interest in little old me? You know, I feel very alone in this life. I feel very isolated. Even if he does exist, he's just out there somewhere. And I can't really believe he would have any interest or commitment in me. But think about this for a moment. If we just even think about the verses that we've read, Jesus coming to earth as a baby, God on earth. What does this tell us? It tells us his humility, but it also tells us his red-hot commitment to come and have relationship with you and me. I mean, what else could God possibly do apart from that to come and to prove his passion to connect with humanity? And any of you who are parents here, if you've got kids, you will know that if they were ever in danger, your commitment to go and rescue them and to connect with them and to save them would be absolute and complete. So, for example, if our house was on fire and I knew Daisy and Lillian were there, to be honest with you, I would genuinely, as any parent would do, would smash that door down, push through burning timbers. I would do anything I need to do to get them. I would be committed to them because of my love for them. And when we think about this here, this is kind of what we're saying God did. He actually was so committed to this earth, so committed to restoring that broken relationship, he kicked through a fiery house, as it were. He put on human flesh and became a little baby and became a man so that we could know who God was. Incredible commitment. Don't ever think that God isn't interested in you. Believe me, these verses tell us he is profoundly interested. But thirdly, it tells us not just the humility and the commitment, but also tells us the compassion of God. I think we can often think, if there is a God, I bet he doesn't feel what I feel when I see the pain and the suffering in this world. But actually, if we really take hold of the fact that God became a man, the whole thing of the incarnation, it tells us that God's heart is more soft, more feeling, more emotional about the real pain and the real injustice in this world than anything else. And think about it, Jesus lived a life full of pain, full of difficulties. So when you think about your suffering and your pain, Jesus can with authenticity say, I have compassion with knowledge. Actually, I know what it's like to be lonely. I know what it's like to be misunderstood. I know what it's like, actually, to have people hate you and not like you and see you in a way that you wouldn't want. The amazing thing about these verses that are so familiar to us is actually they are staggering. They are amazing. They give us a little glimpse into just the possibility that if this God is real, even if you've grown up in this country and you're totally familiar with these verses, I would appeal to you to maybe reconsider this Christmas time as to whether actually we've really allowed them to speak to us in the way that God would want us to. I've been a Christian about 3 months. I went for a beer with a mate of mine called Bob. And Bob was an atheist, as I've been for many years. And Bob said to me, Tom, I can't understand how you can believe in God. And I was like, fair enough. And he said, for me to believe in God, I think it would literally take God's coming down from heaven and, I don't know, becoming a man somehow and saying, here I am. And then there was a silence as it dawned on Bob what he'd just said, which actually I think kind of summarizes what most people in this world would say. If they really wanted to know God was real, if God was really committed to proving it, he'd come down and show us. Well, that's exactly what we celebrate every year. These verses are familiar, but my appeal to you this Christmas time is that they would have power, and that perhaps if you've never quite seen them in that light, that this year would be a different year, and that you would in your own way maybe just start to investigate a little bit more about this great celebration of God coming to rescue planet Earth. I think we're going to sing one final hymn, is that right? Shall we sing? Shall we stand?